Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here, pastor teacher at Sugarland Bible Church. This is Pastor's Point of View number 368. This is being released August 15th, 2025. We have a aggressive prophecy update for you today. If you'll take a look at our preview slide, there's the three areas that we're going to try to cover in this particular session. There's been some developments in the area of our trajectory into a cashless economy. There is an awful lot going on related to global crisis management. We'll explain that a little bit as we progress. And then, of course, there's some new developments related to the persecution of God's people in the last days, and we will be discussing and studying and analyzing how all of this fits into the prophetic scenario. But let's go ahead and start with cashless, if we could. As always, the biblical entry point when discussing a coming cashless global economy is the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 16 through 18. That's the infamous Mark of the Beast passage, which says this: He, that would be the false prophet working for the Antichrist, setting up a system of finance in the second half of the tribulation period. He causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. So there you see it in verse 17. An economy that you can't participate in without receiving some kind of mark on your body, right hand or forehead. So this envisions a cashless economy where people are trafficking, if you will, or doing their transactions with a mark and not cash, which means for that prophecy to become a reality, we have to be transitioned out of cash and into an economy that revolves around something that does not include cash. And I have a lot of older commentaries on the book of Revelation in my library, and it's kind of interesting reading commentaries 100 years ago, watching them try to make sense of that prophecy. They could not envision something like that coming to pass literally. And so a lot of them just took it and allegorized it and spiritualized it and said it was, non-literal or not literal, but we don't have to do that, do we? Because we see the technology is in place for this kind of system to come about. I mean, we're sitting on all the technology where all of these prophecies are believable and realizable. Here's something I found online, and this has to do with some workers there at IBM. In 1956, trying to load a large crate onto a truck, and this is what it says there at the bottom. This is a 5 megabyte hard drive being shipped by IBM in 1956. So notice how much space 5, megabytes, is that what they are, took up. It's about the size of a crate, taking at least 4 men, to move it onto a truck or a box car. And now data of that size fits very easily on a flash drive, something very small. And some of the flash drives are not even dealing with the megabytes anymore. They're dealing with something bigger, gigabytes, etc. So obviously technology has developed incredibly since 1956. And the interesting thing about technology is it never takes a U-turn. It never goes back to square one. You can't go back to horse and buggy days. But technology always builds on what comes before it. And I was reading something recently where an author indicated that technology doubles every 2 months. And then it doubles again after 2 months based on the number that it just doubled to. So it's just increasing at an exponential rate. And we're living in a society, we're living in a world where we're sitting on all of these technological advances, which make many of the prophecies discussed in Scripture very, very believable, very, very realizable. And this is certainly something that is happening in our movement into a cashless economy. We have the technology for it now, and we may have taken a major step in that direction. Notice this particular article here. This is our first article. This one comes from the Post-Millennial, July 18th, 2025. It says, Trump signs Genius Act into law to make us the crypto capital of the world. Now, I'm a supporter of the president. I voted for the president 3 times, but I don't know if any president has the ability to stave or hold off the hand of technology, particularly in the area of finance. And as we look at this, I just want you to ask yourself this very simple question. Does this kind of system, this Genius Act, making the United States the crypto capital of the world, I mean, does this push us further away from the mark of the beast cashless system, or does it push us in the direction of the mark of the beast cashless system? I would argue the latter. We're being pushed all the time just by virtue of technology in the direction of this mark of the beast system. But notice this particular article. Notice what it says. It says President Donald Trump signed the guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stable coins, and that's where the acronym GENIUS comes from. Genius Act into law on Friday, creating regulations for cryptocurrencies. Stable coins are digital currencies tied to stable assets like gold or the U.S. dollar to maintain consistent value. The article here quotes Trump as saying, this could be perhaps the greatest revolution in financial technology since the birth of the internet itself. So the question is this a positive thing? Is this a negative thing? There's a lot of voices out there arguing that this kind of move has the potential of taking away our freedom and our privacy rights as consumers. One of the people that has raised their voice against this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. We've got about a 3-minute clip of her talking about this on Steve Bannon's War Room, and let's go ahead and give this a listen at this time.
I'm very confused about the Genius Act. I thought there was a deal made by the president to make sure that included was going to be the central bank digital currency. There'd be no possibility of a backdoor to get that. So where are we?
Steve, let me explain something. In 1971, we went off of the gold standard. The Federal Reserve did that. And we went to cash, a cash society. And the value of the dollar has drastically gone down to the buying power is less than 10 cents now from where it was in the 1950s before we went off the gold reserve. What's happening today on July 17th in 2025 when no one is paying attention, no one's talking about it, everyone is in blind rage about the Epstein files, and I don't blame them. However, right now, what is being voted on today in Congress is the entire setup, groundwork, and an entire infrastructure being laid to move from cash to digital currency. And the number one thing that is not happening today is a ban on a central bank digital currency. This means the ability for the government to take control of your digital bank account where all your money is and turn it off. And this is why I'm so upset and it's not being talked about. Steve, I was the only no vote on the rule last night. And Congress set a record last night, and no one's talking about that either. This was the longest vote held open for a rule in history. And it finally shut down sometime around midnight because there was a deal made, and the deal will not be honored. It was a deal that Speaker Johnson made, and he said that he would put a ban on central bank digital currency in the NDAA. But let me tell you something, that's going to get stripped out in the Senate, because what they told us all week long is the Senate does not have the votes to pass a ban on a central bank digital currency. So I want to lay this out straight for you all. You never thought in your lifetime that the government would shut you down, would close your churches, would close your schools, would close your business. And that happened only a few years ago. But what is happening today is the groundwork is being laid, and it's all in the name of cryptocurrency and stablecoin. But it is the entire regulatory process to switch us from cash to a cashless society to digital currency that can be controlled by the federal government. And there will be no ban on a central bank digital currency. There will be no way to protect your ability to fully control your digital currency in the future. And I'm voting no to this today. I don't know if there'll be any other no votes on the Republican side, but I'm voting no to this because I'm a Christian and I've read the Bible and I believe what Revelations 13:16-17 says. And I just cannot vote for a future system that will do that.
Of course, very interesting. She says she's a Christian. She quotes the same passage we just read, Revelation 13, verses 16 and 17. She did call it Revelations, which it is not. It's just the book of Revelation. But, that little issue notwithstanding, she's pointing out the fact that this is moving us away from cash and potentially towards the mark of the beast system. She's not a fan of it, even though she's a supporter, an advocate for the president of the United States. And when you keep your ear to the ground, there's a lot of voices that are sounding the alarm about this new Genius Act, which has now become law. Notice this voice here. This one comes from Greg Hunter. This is the USA Watchdog. The title of this is 100% Chance of Nuclear War by Greg Hunter, but he deals with the Genius Act also. We're not going to deal with the nuclear war issue today. But here's what he says in this particular article concerning this Genius Act, which now is law under Trump. He says the other big event that happened that will change the economic system forever is the House just passed the so-called Genius Act. And as you know, that stands for Guiding and Establishing National Innovations for U.S. Stable Coins. Stable coins and the Genius Act are not good news for financial freedom or any other kind of civil liberty. Armstrong says, quote, the government will say, if we don't like this guy, debank him. Let me just stop there for a minute. I mean, they've debanked a lot of people. This is what happened to Mike Lindell when he wouldn't play ball in 2020. He got debanked from numerous banks, if I remember correctly. Continuing with the story, it says the government cannot do it directly, so they indirectly do it the other way. I know guys that are gun dealers and bullion dealers, and they have been debanked. This is the world that we are going into. Europe, in other words, this has already been rolled out in Europe. Europe is far worse. Spain now says you can't take out $3,000 without governmental permission. And then right here in the middle of the article, this is what it says. I've got it emboldened. They are trying to eliminate cash. Let me read that sentence again. They are trying to eliminate cash. The forms of government we have today are going to collapse. Republics are the most corrupt form of government, period. So it's interesting that you've got another voice there sounding the alarm concerning this is going to lead to a cashless economy. and a corresponding deterioration of financial freedom, because as things become digitized, it becomes easy to just shut off the valve of somebody that isn't playing ball. They're posting the wrong things. They're reading literature, purchasing things via literature that are politically incorrect. They donate to the wrong causes. They give their offerings to the wrong kinds of churches. All of that now is at the government's fingertips, and the powers that be can shut off the money supply. If someone happens to be espousing things, posting the wrong things online, etc., that are outside the government narrative. And if the government won't do it, then those that are manipulated and controlled by the government can do it. Something that cannot be done as long as we are doing our transactions in cash, because if I'm paying in cash for things, there's no electronic paper trail on me. But the moment things become completely digitized is the moment there's a paper dossier on me, and the government can run an electronic profile on me. Am I the type of person that will cooperate with the beast system or not? Now, I realize that, everybody says, come on now, Trump is in charge, everything's going to be fine, but Trump won't always be there. I mean, this system could fall into the wrong hands. Ultimately, we know it will via the Antichrist, yet future. And they told us the same kind of thing you might remember about the Patriot Act. It was under the Patriot Act that we got this kind of parallel judicial system to try terrorists. And it was a Republican president, George W. Bush, that gave us this in the post 9/11 world. And while the Bush administration did not abuse the Patriot Act and the new legal system it created, a subsequent administration, I should say, turned the Patriot Act against the patriots. That's what the incarceration against their constitutional rights of all of the J6 protesters was all about. So just because people love Trump and think Trump would never abuse the system, keep in mind that Trump is creating a system and we don't know who his predecessor is going to be and what he's going to do with the system and how successor is going to be, I should say, not predecessor, successor is going to be, and how they might abuse the system. Here is another voice that is crying out against this Genius Act. This one comes from Lioness of Judah, Substack.com, July the 16th, 2025. And it says, no, that's the right one. It says, exposing the darkness. It says, while you were distracted. Trump's Genius Act, CBDC, will allow government to punish vax mandate refusers by freezing bank accounts. Isn't that what they did to Mike Lindell? Froze his bank account, debanked him. Under the cover of the Epstein distraction, the most momentous coup over the U.S. Constitution in U.S. history is quietly taking place. And before I read anything from this article, I just want to point out that isn't this the way things normally work? They get us distracted with something, the Epstein case, the Epstein file, and a good magician, as he's drawing your attention to his right hand, you never pay attention to what he's doing with his right hand, because once he's got you distracted and everybody's looking at his right hand, it's his left hand that he's using to do the trick on you. And that's typically how the governments of the world operate. And so while everyone is obsessed, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, rightfully so, with this Epstein files issue, what they brought in is this kind of digital dollar system, which is moving us in the direction of a cashless economy. Here is a couple of lines from the article, if I may. It says the Genius Act would create a digital dollar, the stable coin, which would likely eventually replace all cash and would enable governments to freeze the accounts of anyone declared in violation of lawful federal or state executive branch regulations, such as the vax mandates passed down in 2021 by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Trump is doing the exact opposite of what he pledged to an audience soon after he was elected in November 2024. He said he would ban CBDCs. By the way, when he did that via executive order, we praised him for that. But here is something that's now coming into existence that seeks to maybe not overtly, but subtly undo that executive order. It says he said he would ban CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, but stable coins are in every important respect CBDCs. Bitcoin magazine editor Mark Goodwin explains that Trump's stable coins essentially are the CBDCs he's promised to ban and has an executive order going back to February of 2025. Goodwin says stable coins are the bait and switch for direct issued government CBDCs. Stable coins can be programmed exactly like how we fear CBDCs will be programmed. They're exactly the same tokenized mechanism. They can be taken out of your wallet. Your wallet can be blacklisted. A lot of the things that we fear about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, are totally available within the tool set of stable coins. Moreover, the Genius Act, Moreover, the Genius Act stablecoins CBDC is but one piece of the control grid, which is rapidly being built by Trump. Other parts are massive Stargate AI data centers, which are necessary to hold the gargantuan database records on each and every American. The so-called Real ID, which is essentially a biometrics such as facial recognition scans, which is an identifier which will link to every bit of data on every person. This data will then be combed through and evaluated by AI. Ultra-high resolution street cameras will track, record, and monitor every person's movements. And an extrajudicial social credit score system, much like in China's, will rate and rank citizens according to their behavior. So this is, I would say, the downside of the Trump administration, which I've been very positive about, very bullish on. But as we've brought out in other shows, this is the kind of thing, and his affiliation with these tech CEOs that are sort of bringing something upon us that most Americans are really not aware of. The article goes on and it says an excellent overview on what Trump is doing is given by Catherine Austin Fitts, former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, in other words, under President George Bush Sr. Catherine Austin Fitts warns Trump, is moving very fast. He said no CDs. I don't know if you've read the Genius Act, which is the new plan for stablecoins. Okay, a CBD is issued, and this would be issued by the Federal Reserve. The guys who own the New York Fed are all going to create subsidiaries and issue stablecoin, which will be inoperable and can work with a social credit score system. Catherine Austin Fitts, Trump's Genius Act stablecoin and the CBD are the same thing. This is what Catherine Austin Fitts said. In addition to granting itself the power to confiscate, i.e. freeze the assets of any person for the perceived violation of any federal or state agency regulation without due process, a power nowhere enumerated in the Constitution to the federal government, the control grid will eliminate all privacy. the monitoring of transactions by the government and of the movement of people violates Fourth Amendment privacy guarantees, which have been deemed by courts to be an outgrowth of the freedom from search without a warrant. Newsweek said in January 2022 in an article entitled, CBDs will be the end of American freedom. CBDs could create an authoritarian surveillance state, close quote. An American central banker, president of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, Neil, let's see if I can pronounce this, Kashkari, said in 2022 that a CBDC would allow the federal government to monitor every one of your transactions. He said, I get why China would be interested. Why would the American people be for that? So this is a prophecy update. I mean, we're not here to promote a particular politician and just be an apologist for that politician. There are many wonderful things the Trump administration is doing to slow down the progress of evil, but here's something that is happening that's actually accelerating us in the direction of the mark of the beast system. One of the things to understand is Satan, no matter who's in power, always seems to have a back door. You know, I was a big fan of Ronald Reagan, but one of our most conservative presidents in modern times. But keep in mind that Reagan also gave us amnesty, I think in his second term. Reagan had a golden opportunity to appoint a true constitutionalist to the United States Supreme Court, a man named Robert Bork, who he subsequently nominated, and Bork was shot down by the Senate Confirmation Committee. But it's largely believed that if Reagan had appointed Bork immediately when he came to office, he probably could have made it through the confirmation process. But Reagan did not appoint Robert Bork immediately. He appointed Sandra Day O'Connor, who just became sort of a rubber stamp for liberal causes, Roe versus Wade, etc. So my point is, no matter who is in power, the devil always has some kind of backdoor. And what I'm describing to you here is potential backdoor in the Trump administration. In prior broadcasts, you'll remember that I've had a few critical words to say about his spiritual advisor and the person that he's put over spirituality in the White House, someone named Paula White, who is doctrinally unstable. So just because I generally like the president doesn't mean I'm just a clapping seal for everything that he does. And here is something I think the Trump administration has done here with this Genius Act, which I think is ultimately negative in terms of our personal freedom and privacy, and may even be playing a monumental role in moving us in the direction of a cashless economy, setting the stage for Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18, as Marjorie Taylor Greene indicated. One more article on this subject. Notice this particular article from this group is called Now the End Begins, July 19th, 2025. It says, Market. Donald Trump signs the Genius Act into law, taking the first step towards ending the dollar and establishing cryptocurrency as the new standard. I don't have much to read to you from this article other than how it summarizes at the end. It says White House crypto and Al Khazar David Sachs took the podium briefly to praise Trump and the legislation, saying, while he's used to the tech world moving quickly, the speed at which the Genius Act became law, this was fast even for us at Silicon Valley. And remember how it came into existence as everyone was distracted over the Epstein files. He said, quote, it will update the archaic payment rails with a revolutionary new payment system, and it will extend the U.S. dollar dominance, like Trump said, globally by creating the digital dollar that people, listen to this is a quote from the president, that people all over the world can use. So this is not something that's supposed to be limited to the United States. This is supposed to eventually go all over the world. I mean, isn't that what Revelation 13, 16 through 18 is talking about when it says neither free nor slave, rich nor poor, small nor great could exempt themselves from this system. It's global in nature. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying this is the mark of the beast system. I'm not going to say this is that, but this is stage setting, inching us towards the mark of the beast system. So with all that being said, let's jump into our second category that we want to talk about in this prophecy update, and that has to do with crisis management. Let me give you this quote here from the Club of Rome. This is by a couple of globalist writers writing back in 1991 in a book called The First Global Revolution. These writers are named Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider. They write, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, would fit the bill. And what they're saying is to have global governance, we've got to have a global crisis. If we have a global crisis, then the nations of the earth will acquiesce their sovereignty to some sort of transnational or trans-federal global bureaucracy who promises to solve the crisis for us. You can't have global government without a global problem, and they came up with the issue of the environment. If we convince people there's some kind of crisis in the environment that we're causing, then they're going to acquiesce their political and economic freedom to some nameless, faceless bureaucrat that's unaccountable that you don't vote for to solve the crisis for them. We would never give up our freedom without a crisis of this magnitude. We need a crisis to bring in global government, which is what the Club of Rome that these two work for is all about. And so they came up with this idea of the environment. And that's why I'm very leery about people that are always talking about we're causing something in the climate or the environment that we're causing. And if we don't curtail our behavior, then the climate is going to react against us negatively. So we need to submit to some kind of transnational authority to help us in this regard. Al Gore articulated this concept all the way back in 1992 in his book, Earth in the Balance. It was at that time Al Gore wrote in this book, page 269, quote, "We must make the rescue of the environment the central organizing principle for civilization," close quote. How do you bring in central planning over the entire world, which is what global government is all about? Well, you have to convince people that the environment needs to be rescued. And the environment needs to be rescued because we're causing some kind of crisis in the environment. A Christian who understands the book of Genesis 8, verse 22, would never fall for something like this. This is why Satan has worked so hard to dismiss early Genesis from the mind of the average Christian. Most pastors today, we just took our whole youth group and many families in our church to the Ark exhibit put together by Ken Ham, defending literal Genesis 1 through 11. And it's very, very sad to learn that most seminaries don't stand on a literal interpretation of Genesis 1 through 11, nor do most spiritual leaders, nor do most pastors, nor do most evangelical leaders. We've completely decided that those chapters aren't literal because Darwin's evolution must be true. But if you believe literal Genesis, you could never fall for this anthropogenic, man-made climate change mentality, because God in the Noahic covenant right after the flood very clearly explained that the world that we're living in would go through natural rhythms that don't have anything to do with what kind of business you have, or what kind of hairspray you use, or what kind of toothpaste you use, or whether you drive an SUV or not. Notice what this text says. It says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, look at this, we've got it underlined there, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So there's going to be seed time and harvest regardless of what people do. There's going to be summer and winter regardless of how people act. There's going to be day and night, whether you drive an SUV or not. And right there thrown into the mix is cold and heat. The earth is going to go through natural rhythms of cold and heat, regardless of capitalism, the free market, human activity. Some of my friends that have studied this area very carefully tell me that we had global warming in the time of the Vikings, long before SUVs became a modern day innovation. But you have to erase that scripture from the minds of people and get them to think that, oh my goodness, we need to rescue the earth. In fact, we don't just need to rescue the earth, we actually need to worship the earth, because the earth is not just an inanimate object, but it's a living, breathing, thinking entity. And if we don't treat it right, it's going to retaliate against us through earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, etc. That's called the Gaia hypothesis. So the Gaia hypothesis and climate alarmism go hand in hand, and they are a pretext, as I've tried to explain, for global governance. And so with all of that being said, notice what King Charles is up to. We don't call him Prince Charles anymore because of the death of, his mother, Elizabeth. He became not just Prince Charles, but King Charles. I call him Charles in charge. And he, along with the Pope, have done more to lay out the pretext for the New World Order than any other two men that I can think of. They've just done it religiously. The New World Order has three components. There's an economic angle, a political angle, and a spiritual angle. Charles in charge, along with the Pope, are laying down the spiritual reality which is necessary for the New World Order to come into existence. Charles has been doing this for a long time. He's been promoting the Gaia hypothesis at the Rio de Janeiro summit going back to around 1992. And now that he's not just Prince Charles anymore, but King Charles anymore, notice what he just did. This is an article that comes from the Christian Institute. This is July 18th, relatively new or recent, 2025. And it says, King Charles honors Mother Earth in Highgrove fire pit ceremony. Here's what the article says. It says, the king has hosted a ceremony in honor of Mother Earth. I've got that emboldened there. That's Gaia. That's be nice to your mother, or the earth is going to retaliate against us. Boy, you start to believe that kind of stuff, and you'll submit to global governance immediately. It says the king hosted a ceremony in honor of Mother Earth at a gathering to promote his philosophy of harmony. Conducted by Mindahi Bastida, the guardian and ritual ceremony officer of a Mexican indigenous people group, the fire pit ceremony included incantations and blessings. See how spiritual this is, by the way? The Harmony Summit was a collaboration between the King's Foundation and the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, both founded by His Majesty and Bastida's Earth Elders, a group that counts a medicine woman and a healer of dreams amongst its leaders. And just like you've got elders at your church, very spiritual men, notice that there are, with this Gaia mindset, Earth Elders. The article says, describing the event, BBC correspondent Sean Coughlin said, during the ceremony in which King Charles participated, Coughlin reported, quote, "We rotated as we honored the North, the South, the East, and the West, and then Mother Earth," close quote. Bastida hailed the event as an important step towards rebalancing our systems by centering indigenous knowledge, protecting sacred lands, and remembering that true progress begins with listening to nature. Why would you listen to nature? Because nature has a voice. Nature has something to say. Nature wants to tell us when we're mistreating our mother. And if we don't behave properly, nature will rebel against us. This is Gaia. It's a form of spirituality that will, like no other thing I can think of, usher us into the empire of the Antichrist and global governance. He also said, quote, "To move forward, we must go back to restore our relationship with the earth, guided by ancestral wisdom and original thought," close quote. The King's Foundation has said His Majesty's philosophy, quote, "sees everything in nature as interconnected, including ourselves. This means taking a holistic approach to the challenges facing our planet and looking to solve these changes by working with nature rather than against her," close quote. Christian Institute Director, let's see if I'm pronouncing this right, last name Kelly, said, quote, "This or the event and the philosophy underpinning it celebrates paganism and conflicts directly with His Majesty's coronation vow to be the defender of the faith," close quote. King Charles took a vow when he moved from Prince Charles to King Charles upon the death of his mother Elizabeth to be the defender of the faith. What faith? The Christian faith. Well, he's obviously not defending that. He is promoting something antithetical to the Christian faith, which is this idea of pantheism, worshiping nature instead of God. And notice how he keeps talking about the interconnectedness of everything. I mean, that's in the environmental equilibrium. That's Gaia hypothesis. You damage one part of the environment, it's going to affect everything else, supposedly. And all of this environmental overkill and all of this sort of Gaia pagan spirituality is something that is being put into place now by King Charles and also the Pope, particularly the last Pope, the spirituality that's necessary for the New World Order to come into existence. You know, is it really true that, oh my goodness, we're going to destroy the environment through our SUVs and hairspray and toothpaste and where we work and what we eat? Well, I don't think so. Notice this particular article from Newsmax. This is dated Friday, July the 25th, 2025. And this particular article says the EPA is expected to say greenhouse gases are not harmful. Notice what the article says. It says the Clean Air Act of 1970 empowered the EPA to regulate air pollution, which may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare. For decades, the law applied to pollutants like lead, ozone, and soot. That led to the 2009 endangerment finding, which declared greenhouse gases a threat to the public health and welfare based on the overwhelming scientific consensus and peer review research. In March, the EPA, under Administrator Lee Zeldin, under the Trump administration, announced a formal reconsideration of the finding. Quote, "The Trump administration will not sacrifice national prosperity, energy security, and the freedom of our people for an agenda that throttles our industries, our mobility, our consumer choice, while benefiting adversaries overseas," close quote, he said. The government is expected to undo the earlier finding that greenhouse gases endanger public welfare. It will argue that the economic costs of regulation have been undervalued, and it will downplay the role of U.S. motor vehicle emissions in climate change. So all of this environmental alarmism related to greenhouse gases may not be true or accurate according to this particular article from Newsmax. But at any rate, I wanted to bring these things to your attention because this type of pagan spirituality, I think, is largely a pretext for global government, which Bible prophecy anticipates is on the horizon. Just as the whole thing is falling apart scientifically, the spirituality is being laid down in cement, and we're moving very, very rapidly into global government. We shouldn't be surprised by that because God said in Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18, this day will come. Let's jump to our last category that we're going to do in this particular session, and here we're dealing with persecution. The coming persecution against the blood-bought saints, God's people, is part of the prophetic scenario. One of the verses we use to demonstrate this is Revelation 17, verse 6, which talks about the city and the system of the Antichrist in the last days. It's which is a woman or a harlot. It says, "I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. He said to me, the waters," and you notice our image below of what the waters represent, they're peoples. "He said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." A lot of things we could talk about here, but really the bottom line for our purposes today is there's coming upon the world scene a world religion which will have influence over everyone on planet Earth, and it will be drunk with the blood of the saints, meaning it will persecute God's people. And I believe that that type of persecution, even though that system is not fully in place, is ramping up. In fact, I would argue that as Islam spreads throughout the world, and even throughout the United States of America, and I'll show you some evidences of that in just a second, persecution automatically increases. Persecution against who? Two people, the Saturday people, the Jews, and the Sunday people, the Christians. Show me a place where Islam gets the upper hand and that doesn't happen. It always happens. And Islam is spreading here in the United States of America, even right here in Houston. Notice this particular article from the Rare Foundation, July 15th, 2025, and this is an airport that I'm in and out of constantly. It says Houston Airport, that would be Bush International, goes Sharia. The George Bush Intercontinental becomes a front line for Islamization. Well, what's happening there at this particular airport? The article says this. It says the Islamization of Texas is no longer a slow creep. It's a full-on sprint. And Houston is at the center of it. at the George Bush Intercontinental Airport, a full Sharia-compliant Islamic prayer complex has been installed in Terminal D. It includes a gender-segregated prayer rooms and a ritual washing facility for purification. It is explicitly designated for Muslim use with no accommodations for other faiths. My goodness, where's the ACLU when you need them? You know, if Christians had tried to set up something like this, there'd be a lawsuit by the ACLU instantaneously. But when it comes to Islam, nobody seems to care. The space is fully equipped with Islamic prayer-specific amenities, including Qurans, prayer rugs, prayer beads, and a turba, which is a clay tablet used in prostration. This is not a multi-faith chapel. It is a dedicated Islamic worship center embedded inside a major American airport. Ask yourself, where is the church in Mecca's airport? Where is the synagogue in Islamabad? They don't exist because those nations protect their identity. Meanwhile, in Texas, we're handing over our public spaces, our schools, our legislatures, and now even our airports. If we don't ban care, reject Sharia infrastructure, and reverse this infiltration, Texas will not remain Texas. It will become a province of the caliphate. Now, do you want more evidence of creeping Islam, creeping Sharia in the United States of America? Here's a very comprehensive article. This one comes from the Geller Report. This one is dated July the 27th, 2025, and the title of it is Wolves in Sheep's Clothing: The Stealth Islamization of America. And it just describes the process that America is now in terms of Islamization. It talks about the strategy. Number one, the deception. Campaigning as moderates, but governing as radicals. And it mentions key players in this. Keith Ellison, Minnesota Attorney General, I believe. Ilhan Omar, Minnesota Congresswoman. Rashida Tlaib, Michigan Congresswoman. It mentions other names that I'm less familiar with. Amir Ghalib, Hamtramck, Michigan mayor, and many, many others. And it just talks about how they all campaigned as moderates, but once they got into office, they became radicals on every single issue. The article goes on and it talks about, from beyond the deception, the practices, how they advance Islamification. Here's a few tools they use. Legislative creep. They introduce bills that seem innocuous but pave the way to Sharia. Gives tons of examples. Community control. They transform local governance by prioritizing Muslim interests. Exploiting victimhood. They weaponize accusations of bigotry to deflect scrutiny. Building alliances with radicals. They align with groups like CARE and Jetpack which funnel resources to Muslim candidates and push Islamic agendas. The article talks about incremental Sharia implementation. Examples include Islamic banking laws, prayer rooms in public buildings, exemptions from secular regulations for Muslim businesses, etc. Foreign policy manipulation. They prioritize Muslim majority nations' interests over America's. That's where the anti-Israelism comes from. Cultural erosion. They promote Islamic norms in public spaces, from dress codes to religious observances, etc., giving tons of examples. The article concludes as follows: the evidence of a pattern. The Islamification process isn't theoretical, it's happening now. In 2022, 89 Muslim candidates won seats across the United States, with groups like Jetpack boasting of their growing influence. Cities like Dearborn and let's see if I'm going to pronounce this right, Hamtramck, are no longer American. They're becoming Sharia enclaves where non-Muslims are marginalized. Schools prioritize Islamic holidays, businesses enforce halal standards, and councils bend to religious demands. In the UK, Muslim candidates won seats in 2024 by exploiting Gaza tensions, overturning labor strongholds with sectarian campaigns. In Tunisia and Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood candidates posed as Democrats only to impose Sharia once in power, banning dissent and enforcing religious laws. Here's how the article concludes. Every election is a battlefield, and every vote for them is a surrender. The article says, demand transparency, scrutinize their ties to groups like CARE, and fight for the Constitution with unrelenting fury. And if we don't, as God is my witness, I'm making a prediction here, not because I'm a prophet nor the son of a prophet. It's just the way things go. Persecution against the Saturday people and the Sunday people will escalate right here in the United States of America. Speaking of worldwide persecution against God's people, notice this particular article from Harbinger's Daily, July the 16th, 2025, and it says, America has not yet criminalized prayer, but the path is quickly being paved in 22 states. It begins with a reference to some people at a memorial service in 2020 who were arrested in southern Wales. Why? Because at the close of the funeral, they masked and socially distanced, but they quietly recited the Lord's Prayer. That was their crime. Local officials cited the family for violating Welsh government pandemic regulations, classifying the prayer as chanting, an activity banned under COVID legislation. Fast forward to 2025, that was 2020. In New South Wales, Australia, prayer can now be considered a criminal act. Under the Conversion Practices Ban Act of 2024, it's illegal to pray with or over someone in a way that is interpreted as trying to suppress or change the sexual orientation or gender identity, even if the person asks for prayer. Yes, you read that correctly. If a struggling believer approaches a pastor and requests prayer for deliverance from homosexual desires or confusion about gender, the pastor could face up to 5 years in prison. The law doesn't even require coercion. Just a prayer and intercession could be grounds for persecution, and words like repent may be enough to trigger legal action. Australia's law goes further. It criminalizes private conversations, counseling, and even sermons that are not explicitly affirming of the LGBTQ plus lifestyle. Scotland has taken a similar turn. The government recently passed legislation that restricts not just prayer, but prayer within designated free speech restricted zones around abortion facilities. This means even praying silently in your home, wow, if it can be heard in these zones, may be considered illegal if authorities deem it intellectual or reckless. In April, the Family Research Council released a sobering report entitled, Is Prayer a Crime? Government Restrictions on Prayer in Europe. It documents numerous cases where believers were arrested not for shouting or protesting, but for quietly praying near abortion clinics. Sweden, Spain, Northern Ireland, and other parts of the EU are following suit. The UK's Public Order Act of 2023 imposes buffer zones of nearly 500 feet around abortion facilities, criminalizing prayer, peaceful presence, or offering to help women. In Scotland, the buffer expands to 656 feet under the Safe Access Zones Act. It's very tempting to read all this and say, well, that's abroad. It doesn't affect us here in the United States of America. Well, think again. The article says 22 states, including California, New York, and Illinois, have banned so-called conversion therapy. While most bans currently target licensed counseling practices, the definition is expanding. Private prayer and spiritual guidance could soon be swept in. One more reference to Australia. It says it's already illegal for clergy to offer biblical counsel on same-sex attraction or gender confusion, even if it is requested. So, folks, do we see what's happening here globally? Or something as innocent as praying. You pray the wrong thing. You pray something that's politically correct. That leads to criminal action. I mean, this is something that is enveloping the globe. It's stage setting for what the book of Revelation chapter 17 anticipates about this coming one world religious system that will be drunk with the blood of the saints. One other quick thing here, well, a couple of other quick things, and I'll do these very fast on persecution. This is another article from the Post-Millennial, July 26, 2025. It says the Trump White House was alerted to blatant Christian persecution as liberals target a MAGA artist and worshipers. Wow. Canada clamping down on musicians singing about politically incorrect stuff. The article says the Trump White House has been made aware of blatant persecution in Canada after a church was fined in Montreal for holding a worship service with a performance from Sean, I believe it's pronounced Foyt, a Christian artist and supporter of the U.S. president. On Friday, Foyt performed in a private church in Montreal after city officials attempted to cancel the event, citing that he did not have a permit to perform. Montreal mayor has greenlit a $2,500 fine against Private Ministries restaurant church in Montreal. Multiple left-wing run cities now pulled permits for his tours and performances. During the performances in Montreal, a crowd of protesters as well as Antifa agitators gathered around the building, and someone threw a smoke bomb in the church at Foyt while he was performing. Just pausing for a minute, why aren't they clamping down on the free expression rights of these agitators and Antifa? No, they don't clamp down on their rights to express themselves. They clamp down on the rights of the, I guess, pro-Christian, pro-Bible, pro-Trump, pro-MAGA musician. His rights don't exist in Canada. Quote, this show runs counter to the values of inclusion, solidarity, and respect that are championed in Montreal. Freedom of expression is one of our fundamental values. And here we go. But hateful and discriminatory speech is not acceptable in Montreal, a Montreal city spokesman said. As has been said before, those who call the truth hate the truth. It's just coming up with laws that are preventing a certain perspective or value system coming from the Bible, the United States Constitution, patriotism from coming into existence. This is not something that's coming in Canada. This is something that's happening in real time. And the violation of this individual's rights was so egregious that he actually had a conversation with the President of the United States about it. One other quick thing on this issue of persecution. This goes back to the prior administration. This one from Fox News, July 18th, 2025. It says the Biden team coordinated on a school memo calling parents domestic terrorists despite denial. The White House and the DOJ communicated behind the scenes about the controversial school board's memo. The Biden administration and the Department of Justice collaborated on a memo that labeled parents protesting at school board decisions as domestic terrorists. Despite the administration's denial of any involvement, emails reveal the coordination between the White House and the DOJ on the controversial memo. The document dump included an email from a deputy attorney general aide that said that the DOJ was searching for a federal hook to use to address a letter to the National School Board Association wrote to the White House, raising alarm about parents who were, at the time, expressing outrage at school board meetings across the country over the COVID-19 mandates, critical race theory, and transgender policies. Boy, did you know that showing up at a school board meeting can get you labeled as a domestic terrorist? As the Biden administration was cooperating with school boards to get all of these patriotic protesting parents labeled as domestic terrorists. I mean, why were they protesting? Because they were figuring out what their kids were being taught, because they were all home due to the mandates, and they discovered that what was being shoved down the throats of these children was CRT and a bunch of other LGBTQ gobbledygook, and they exercised their patriotic duty and voiced their concerns at school board meetings all over the country during the Biden years. And here's the Biden regime, as I'll call it, cooperating with the school boards, trying to figure out a way to get these patriotic parents labeled as domestic terrorists. Why do they want them labeled as domestic terrorists? Because if you're labeled as a domestic terrorist, you can be tried under the Patriot Act, which has minimal constitutional protections. Just ask the J6 protesters all about it. And here's the Biden administration working with school boards to label these patriotic parents as domestic terrorists. It's unbelievable to me. This is not the United States of America that I grew up in. This is a world in the United States of America that is seeing a rapid destruction of any free speech, freedom of association, freedom of expression rights. It's happening worldwide. We mentioned all the countries involved in these kinds of things, as well as right here in the late, great United States of America. Let's wrap up, if we could, with some good news. Titus 2:13. Well, let's review what we've studied. We've looked at in this session cashless, global crisis management, and persecution. And all of these things are thrusting us into the end times scenario. Titus 2:13 says, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. There's some good news in it, really good news, that before the wrath of God hits planet Earth, and it's coming very, very quickly, God's people will be taken out of this earth and taken into heaven in an event called the Rapture of the Church. And if you know Jesus personally, you'll be tied into that event. And the way to get to know Jesus personally is by receiving a free gift from him. And the only way to receive a free gift from God is to trust in the one that he has sent, meaning to believe. Once you place your trust in what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross 2,000 years ago, just like that, you're made right with God. You're tied into his wonderful promises, not the least of which is the participation in this any moment event called the Rapture of the Church. I hope and pray many people within the sound of my voice will be placing their faith in the Messiah even as I speak. Just a few infomercials, if I may. Go to the App Store, type in Andy Woods Ministries into the search engine, and download our free app to get all of our content, recent and dated. Go to wherever it is you get your podcasts, type in Andy Woods Ministries into the search engine, and just like that, you can enjoy our pastor's point of view shows in podcast format. Go to our website, andywoodsministries.org, to get all of our content. And there's a conspicuous way on the homepage to sign up for our show notes. These notes that I read from will show up in your inbox every Friday once we post a pastor's point of view show. If you're considering theological training, I would encourage you to investigate the school that I'm the president of, Chafer Theological Seminary. As you're over there at our Facebook page and website, visiting what we have to offer, don't forget to download a free copy of our academic journal. The latest issue was just released, and the fall schedule has just been rolled out. So now is your time to jump in and take a class or two as your schedule allows it. August 17th, I am going to be in Tampa, Florida at Bayside Community Church. There's a Sunday school hour and then a main service. I'll be speaking at both, dealing with the divine institutions. I hope to see many of my friends that particular Sunday morning, August 17th. Tom Hughes has a conference coming up that I'm one of many participants in, called the Hope for Our Times Texas Conference in Rockwall, Rockwall, Texas. It's going to go September 19th and 20th. There's some information on the screen where you can check out that conference. You can hear myself and many other great speakers at this particular conference. And so check that out. I hope to see you at that event. The Duluth Bible Church Fall Conference is coming up. I sadly won't be there live, but there's a video I'm preparing that they're going to show there on Ezekiel 38 and 39. And it's a conference that basically goes from the 1st all the way through the 5th. You can see on the screen some of the outstanding presentations that you can hear there. So check out that conference as well in Duluth, Minnesota. My friend Brandon House is putting together his Worldview Weekend Conference. That is going to go October 3rd and 4th at a theater in Collierville, Tennessee. Look at all of the patriots and cutting-edge worldview people that you can hear from. I'm going to be presenting along with these others, and so that's going to be a great time. You see some information on the screen where you can find out about that conference. I don't have a screenshot on this, but the pre-trib study group in the Dallas area is going to be coming up December 8th through 10th. At the end of this year, I'm one of the presenters there speaking on Revelation 3:10. And don't forget the Sugarland Bible Church Prophecy Conference. The dates on that are February 20th through 21st. Stick around for church on Sunday on the 22nd of 2026. Look at the lineup there, and that's going to be a great conference on Last Day's Discernment. And really excited about that conference. That'll be our 5th annual prophecy conference hosted by Sugarland Bible Church. Go to profcon.com to learn about all of the exciting details. This is going to be a conference that's bigger and better than anything we've ever done, Lord willing, meeting at the Sugarland Marriott this time around, and a lot of great things there. So please take the time to investigate that. And as the Lord leads, register for it. I'm going to be speaking, no screenshot here, at the Stealing the Mind Conference, March the 14th, 2026 in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That's an all-day Saturday event. Check that out at compassministries.org. Also check out, while you're at compassministries.org, the cruise that my wife and I, along with Bill and Susie Perkins, are going to be hosting through Israel and various Bible lands places as recorded in the book of Acts. That runs September 24th through October 10th of 2026. And yes, you guys have already sold out the cruise. But if you still want to go, you can call Compass Ministries and you can get on the waiting list. So I would encourage you to do that. And then my book, The Bible and Voting, is out. There's a QR code on how to get it. It's also available on Amazon. That's all I've got for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will see you next time, Lord willing, on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.